at guidelines for people who want to be helpful. In other words, if you as a parent or as a spouse or as a youth volunteer, as a minister, as an elder, whatever your role is, if you would like to be someone who helps those who are struggling in this area, what might be helpful for you? Number one, model consistently, model compassion and understanding. Be the person that people just recognize, they're not very judgmental. I see in them a real compassion for helping people who are hurting. If that's not you, if you're not a person of compassion, if people get from you a lot of harsh judgment, a lot of harsh critical comments, they hear from you, I can't believe so-and-so is doing that. If that's the type of message you're sending to people, you're probably not going to be in a position to help people who are really struggling. So we need to be, in our effort to help, people need to consistently be getting the message from us. We're understanding. We try to be compassionate. We try to empathize with where people are at, as opposed to imposing a lot of judgment and criticism at people's imperfections. We need to avoid giving advice. Typically, a person who's struggling with sexual behavior is not necessarily looking for advice. Now, there may be a point at which they need some good sound advice and wise counsel. But typically, especially if somebody's first coming, they're looking probably more for an understanding person. They're looking for support. They're looking to know that somebody cares and somebody's willing to accept them with all this nasty stuff in their life. So the time for giving advice is typically not at that moment. Help them identify options. It seems like here might be a course you could pursue, and then you might be able to do this over here. Or you may consider doing path C. So help them think through options. Help them look down the path. Okay, if you do this, what are likely results? What might you encounter if you go down that road? Or if you go down this road, what might be the result of that? So help identify options. Help identify potential consequences to options. In other words, if I do this, this is where this is likely going to lead. May not want to experience that, so let me look at some other options here. Develop a knowledge of the subject. Read. Look at websites. Find out more and more and more about this particular issue. We need to become kind of experts on this topic. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out and get some degree in psychology or counseling or related fields so that you can help people. I'm saying know what's available. Understand the dynamics. There are good books that talk about addictive sexual behaviors and understanding the patterns and what typically goes on behind that. So just kind of become a person who's knowledgeable about this particular issue. Websites, books, videos, seminars, whatever you pick. There are a lot of different good resources out there, but kind of become an informed person about this particular topic. Become comfortable talking about sexual issues. For some of us, we grew up in families that sex was not talked about. Just being in here for the last 3 weeks has probably been a real challenge for some of us. For some, you can talk about sex all day long and it's not a problem. But for others, it's not a comfortable thing to talk about. So if we're going to be in a position of helping people who struggle, we need to develop a more comfortable position in that dialogue. Ways to do that? Get a Christian book that talks about sexuality and read it out loud. Say those words. Use the terms. Read it to your pillow. Read it to your stuffed animal. Read it to your dog. Read it to your spouse. Read it in front of a mirror. Well, probably don't want to do that. That may just be, who's comfortable reading in front of a mirror. But find ways, appropriate relationships to talk about this subject. A close friend, broach that subject. Talk in a healthy way about the subject of sexuality and just become more comfortable talking about the issue. Be willing to address your own issues. I cannot overstate this. If you want to be a person who's helpful to people struggling, and yet this is a struggle for you, right now is not the season of your life to try to be the helper of others. If you're a parent and you want to help your teens develop in a healthy way sexually, and you're struggling yourself with inappropriate online relationships, with pornography, you have a lot of shame and guilt around your own sexual past or your current sexual issues, you're probably not going to be very effective at helping your teen, because in that dialogue with your teen, a lot of your stuff is likely to surface. And if there's a lot of emotion around that, fear of being found out, fear of being asked, well, have you ever struggled with this? Fear of being in a position of having to lie to your teen. If you're struggling with those feelings, that's likely to come out in what I call sideways. In other words, if I'm very fearful of somebody finding out my struggles and we start talking about sex, I'm probably going to come across as angry, or I'm going to shut down because of my fear. So my encouragement is, if this is a struggle for you and you want to be helpful to others, be willing to kind of demonstrate that you're going to deal with this yourself. In other words, it's like Jesus said, you go and you get the big beam, the big log out of your own eye, and there's there's a reason why you do that. You take the beam out of your eye so you can see clearly how to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So if this is an issue in your life, I strongly encourage you, be willing to deal with it yourself. Begin the healing process yourself. Get some time of sobriety behind your path there. Then you're probably going to be in a much more effective role of trying to help somebody else with the struggle. And recognize your limitations. Some of you in here have training in helping other people. You have graduate training, you have psychology, counseling training. Some of you have a lot of training just as a lay person. You've helped a lot of people in the past. You may be at a different level of being able to help people. Some of you have walked this road yourself. You have experienced healing from sexual struggles yourself. That in and of itself is a level of training. Others would say, I don't have any training in this, and I'm not a real compassionate person. Find another role. Be the expert on the resources. Know what information to pass along to other people. But know what your limitations are. If you're not going to help well here, just know that. Be aware of that. So that we're not doing more damage to somebody than we are being of help to them. And develop a list of resources. Know in your area what are resources and what's available.